Right now, the rulers of this country are sharply divided, and society is increasingly ripping apart. Norms and fundamental rights that were long assumed to be permanent are being shredded before our eyes. The commitment by the rulers to the peaceful transfer of power, that's gone. Women's fundamental right to abortion, gone as well.
There is no longer a federal constitutional right to an abortion.
The Supreme Court has essentially reshaped American life.
Everywhere you look, fascist politicians and mobs are on the march.
How many parents want their kindergartners to have transgenderism or something injected into classroom instruction?
Yet among the decent people, there is way too much ignoring this growing nightmare and turning away from the fight that must be waged. And this is all the more criminal because this is a time not only of heightened dangers, but because precisely due to how profound this crisis is and how deeply it is going to cause people to question things that they've normally unthinkingly accepted, there is a heightened possibility to wrench something truly emancipating out of this situation. A real revolution that overthrows the system that is the source of so much misery and oppression all over the world and replaces it with a liberating system on the road to real emancipation. And one of the most widespread, one of the most harmful ways that people are turning away from or being turned away from the fight that must be waged is the growing influence of and the intimidation caused by woke idiocy and woke identity politics. So I am very happy to be joined here in studio today by Rafael Kadaris, a member of the RNL team, to announce that we are launching a new effort to take on this woke idiocy here on this show and out in the world.
Yeah, this is so important because look, the climate of our planet is being destroyed. The US imperialists are moving closer to war with Russia and China. The fascists are advancing. And what's happening on the college campuses, which should be hotbeds of resistance and revolution? And what are all too many of the woke students and intellectuals focused on? Changing words and changing labels on reality, rather than changing reality itself and fighting to end very real oppression. For example, the University of Southern California School of Social Work recently announced that they will no longer use the term field, as in field work or going into the field, because of its connotations with slavery and because it might upset students. Earth to USC, there are lots of fields in the world. By this logic, we should stop saying summer camp because Jewish students might be reminded of concentration camps. But this is the kind of woke lunacy that's all too prevalent on college campuses and beyond. It treats students like they're fragile babies. And it's low-hanging fruit for the fascists at Fox News to ridicule and to use it to deny the existence of actual racist oppression and undermine real struggles against it. And along with this, we have the identity politics police dictating who has a right to speak. And if you haven't experienced something directly, you should just shut up and check your privilege and stay in your lane. For example, a law school in Vermont covered up and is trying to destroy a mural depicting and condemning the brutality of slavery and upholding the abolitionist movement. You might be wondering, was this inspired by Ron DeSantis and the fascist campaign to erase Black history? No. It was woke students and school administrators trying to whitewash the mural, in essence, because the artist is white. One student actually said the artist was depicting history, but it's not his history to depict. Think about the logic of this and where it leads if artists are only allowed to depict their own experience or their own identity group. No more fiction, no more acting, no more imagination. Plus, the history being depicted in these murals is an objective fact, which anyone can learn about and needs to learn about. But in the eyes of these woke identity politics hustlers, oppression becomes something to be owned rather than something to be exposed and fought against by everyone so that it can be ended. As Bob Avakian put it,
this wokeness, with its evading of and diversion from the real struggle that needs to be waged, and its substituting of word changing and cancel culture in place of this struggle, is actually contributing to and furthering this nightmare.
In the coming weeks, we'll be dissecting the whole framework of woke identity politics, the anti-scientific philosophy behind it that denies objective reality, the political program of trying to get inclusion and safe spaces within this oppressive capitalist imperialist system, the way it targets people with a little more privilege but never targets the system itself, and why all this is not just wrong but extremely harmful to the struggle for a better world. We're going to be taking this on in a big way here on the RNL show and on college campuses, and we'll be sharing more about this soon. Today, we're going to be playing a clip from the Bob Avakian interviews on this. But first, we wanted to talk about an experience that Sunsara and I had recently at a university in California where you gave a couple presentations in the lead up to International Women's Day. At one of these events, some students objected to the slogan, "Unleash the fury of women as a mighty force for revolution," basically saying, who are you to say that women's fury should be directed towards revolution? Isn't that a way of co-opting women's fury and denying their agency?
Yeah, this did come up from quite a few of the students. And the first and most important thing, and this is a point that's going to be emphasized in the segment we play from Bob Avakian in a few minutes from the interviews he did on this show, the most important thing to start with is what is objectively true about reality. What is objectively the source of women's oppression? And what objectively can lead us to ending it? And that's a question of science, of scientifically examining reality. It's not a question of who's being centered or who has agency. And a scientific analysis of reality will reveal that the patriarchal oppression of women and all oppression based on gender and sexual orientation is built into this system of capitalism imperialism. And unless and until we overthrow this system and construct a radically different system, a different economic system, social system, legal system, culture, unless and until we do that, we can't really go to work fully on digging up and overcoming thousands of years of oppression and degradation that women have faced. Again, that's a question of science. And the fury of women does need to be directed towards this system that is the source of their fury. That's not co-opting their fury. In fact, it's betraying women and their fundamental interest and urgent need to have an end to their oppression, not to struggle with them to direct it there and to just tail after their fury wherever it might be directed at any given time. I mean, think about all the Christian fascist women who were furious about the so-called killing of babies and played a very big role in the movement that recently overturned women's right to abortion and is causing hell right now for millions of women across this country with worse to come. They were furious. Should we follow them because they're furious? What about their agency? No, I don't think so. Again, it's a question of science and what is the source of this oppression and how do we end it? Or you take a more positive phenomenon like Me Too, and we talked about this with the students. Me Too opened the floodgates of righteous rage of women against sexual assault and harassment. It was very important. Sexual assault and even rape grow out of this system, out of the functioning of this system and how it shapes and molds men and boys. It is really important that this struggle and this fury be unleashed against this in its own right, and that this increasingly be part of a movement for an actual revolution aimed at digging up the system and the soil that gives rise to this. But at the same time, there were other trends within Me Too, we have to be honest, that worked against this, that went in the opposite direction, that got fixated on tearing down individual men or canceling them rather than going after this system and the patriarchal oppression and culture it gives rise to. There were trends of throwing out due process or the presumption of innocence, of starting to treat every accusation as if it was the same as confirmation of guilt. There were trends of revenge against men. Look, I understand how women could become so furious that they say, I don't care if some innocent men suffer. We've been suffering for millennia. Who cares? I understand that fury, but I also know that will not lead to emancipating women or anybody else, and it will do great harm. And so I not only am willing to, but I feel a responsibility to, and we should all feel a responsibility to struggle over where this fury needs to be directed. Again, towards this system, towards overthrowing this system and uprooting it and establishing a radically different system so that we can build a world where never again do women know what it's like to be harassed walking down the street, beaten in their homes, degraded in the culture, raped in their dorms, discriminated against in the workplace, and where we don't live in a world where children labor in sweatshops to make our clothes and our cell phones, where the planet is not being burnt up and dried out and flooded, and where all of humanity has the ability to live and flourish collectively and cooperatively. That is possible through revolution. And that is a beautiful and righteous thing to struggle with women to direct their fury towards. And that is what humanity needs.
Yeah, I really appreciate this. And again, we're going to be going at this in many different ways on this show and out in the world in the coming weeks. Today, as part of launching this effort and really bringing alive even more fully just how harmful this woke identity politics is, how much it takes you away from reality and stands as a major obstacle to the struggle we need to be waging to seize this time, to make a revolution and get all of humanity free, we wanted to play an excerpt from the interview with Bob Avakian last fall, where he addresses this question directly. We'll play the first part of his answer now, which goes into some key dimensions of this woke framework, which are very much related to everything we've been talking about. And we'll show the second part in upcoming shows. So let's watch and make sure to comment with your thoughts.
I want to ask about what you've called woke lunacy. And you've written in Something Terrible or Something Truly Emancipating that woke is becoming a joke, a bad joke. And I think we see expressions of this all the time. Almost any time somebody speaks out against injustice or makes a piece of artwork dealing with other cultures or even exposing injustice, especially if they have some privilege, somebody comes out and calls them out. And quite often a woke mob comes and attacks them, says, who are you to do this? You're appropriating. You've got to stay in your lane, all of this nonsense. But this phenomenon of woke.
Yeah, well, I think, look, it's good to be awake and not asleep, but that's the first thing we can say. But this woke thing has turned into a joke and a bad joke, and the whole identity politics that's bound up with it. Let's start with the basics. We talk about epistemology, which means your theory of knowledge, or you just more simply, your approach to understanding the world. This identity politics and the wokeness that goes along with it is not only unscientific, it's an anti-scientific epistemology. It's an anti-scientific approach to understanding the world, the relations among people, what causes these relations, etc., and so on. Because it basically, is based on the notion that there isn't one objective reality that's the same for everybody. Yes, that objective reality may affect different people differently, but it's the same objective reality. The storm, the hurricane in Florida is a hurricane in Florida for everybody who lives there. It's not a hurricane, that for people who believe in hurricanes, and not a non-hurricane for people who don't believe in hurricanes. So objective reality is objective reality. The earth is round, not flat. That's true for everybody. Kyrie Irving, I don't care who. The earth is round, not flat. That's true for everybody. The earth goes around the sun. That's different than the appearance. It appears that it's the other way around, that the sun is, the sun rises and the sun sets. But that has to do with the position of the earth in relation to the sun. And the earth is going around the sun, not the other way around. That's true for everybody. I don't care, if you like to believe that you are actually controlling the motion of the sun because you are sitting on the earth in a powerful position to determine the motion of the sun. Bullshit. The sun exists independently of you, objectively. That's the same reality. But this identity politics wokeness says there's different reality for different identities and different people. And you hear it all the time. Your truth, our truth. There's not different truths. Truth, let's get this clear. Truth simply means an accurate reflection of reality. It means that what's being said about something corresponds to the actual reality. Like I just said, it's true that the earth is round, not flat. Okay, that's a truth. There's not different truths for different identities. So right away, epistemologically, in terms of its anti-scientific approach, this identity politics wokeness is wrong, and it's bound to do harm because when you're not only unscientific but you're anti-scientific. When you hear some of these wokesters will even say things like, "Oh, objective reality, that's a white male supremacist construct." There is no objective reality. That is obviously harmful, because if you don't even know that there's objective reality, or you deny that there's objective reality, then how can you actually understand objective reality and go about changing it in the way it needs to be changed? You can't. You're only going to be misled, and this does a great deal of harm just on that level. And it confuses a lot of people, and then there's the whole thing that flows out of that. Why? What goes along with denying objective reality and saying that there's not truth, but just different truths for different identities? I mean, yes, look, let's examine it. For people who are oppressed, but by the way, I use the word oppressed deliberately, not marginalized, because let's examine these terms. Things are understood best in terms of their opposites. Mm-hmm. Understand up by what's down, right? Understand cold by what's hot, so on and so forth. What's the opposite of marginalized? It means being not marginalized. It means being in the mainstream. It means being included in the society as it is. If you're talking about marginalization, then that's the logical remedy, quote unquote. But if you're talking about oppression, it's not just our narrative versus their narrative. It's actual oppression, people being held down, forcibly held down, being violently suppressed. That's oppression. It means pushing down on people, keeping them down. If you're oppressed, the answer to it is to end the oppression. And then you go looking for what's the source of the oppression, what is it rooted in, and how do we uproot it? Because if you want to uproot something, you have to know what it's rooted in. And it's rooted in this system, all these different forms of oppression. So marginalized, right there, you see something's wrong. Now, this does a lot of harm, because then if you say there's different realities for different people, and you say some people are marginalized, then those people who've been left out, who've been pushed to the margins or kept in the margins, it should be their turn now. The whole point, Lenin once said, anybody who makes revolution with the outlook, you had your turn, now it's my chance to have a go. Anybody who does that does it with the outlook of the petty bourgeoisie, the middle class. And that is not an outlook that can lead a revolution. The middle class precisely in between. It's caught in between these two contending classes, the proletariat, the masses of oppressed people, and the oppressors, the ruling class. And so it wants to try to carve out a position for itself in between and try to hold off these two different opposing, fundamentally opposing forces. But it can't do it. And so its positions are always, ill-founded. They always are out of keeping with reality. But this is the way these people want to talk about it. Now, if you are trying to actually fight against oppression and you run up against all this identity politics wokeness, then what happens? Well, the marginalized, they haven't been allowed to have their right to speak, and their right to get somewhere, so they have to be in the front of everything. Doesn't matter where it's going as long as they're in the front of it. And, it's not going toward ending their actually oppressed condition. It's just, at most, striving for a better position within the system as it exists with all of its horrific oppression, and yes, resting parasitically, living off of billions of people in the world as a whole.